Salutations from space, folks. This is Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology, and I am on fire because my teacher, Daniel Giamario, is sitting right here in my house drinking tea with me. And even more so because remotely we have joining us the co-founder of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, along with Daniel, Cayelin Castell. How are you, Cayelin?
Hey, great. It's great to be here.
From the fiery deserts of Tucson, Arizona.
Indeed, that's where I'm coming from.
And in Rohnert Park, California, where it is currently a blazing 103 degrees Fahrenheit, Mary Kern. How are you, Mary?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Brett. It's good to be with you and Daniel and Cayelin.
And Mary is a member of the Shamanic Astrology Fire Quadrant Committee. So Daniel, what the heck is that?
Well, when we decided to create 4 quadrants to describe different means, different methodologies of outreach to the general population, we made it into the 4 elements to describe the difference between different groups of individuals. So, for example, we talked about water, and water had to do with the healing and helpful professions. We decided to have fire be about spirit, about spirituality, about paths of enlightenment, about the journey of the soul toward its ultimate destination point. And the reason we chose it to be fire was because fire, alchemically, is that which is closest to spirit. So this quadrant is not necessarily about, the helpful and healing professions. It's not about working the earth mysteries per se. It's about the kinds of things that have to do with inquiry, with meditation, with yoga, and how in the world can something like shamanic astrology be of benefit to the whole spectrum of people who are on a spiritual path, those that are mostly interested in their spiritual path. And so it's within the purvey of the fire quadrant that we discuss these issues. And we want to be able to share here today how the shamanic astrology paradigm and how the shamanic astrology mystery school can be helpful to people on their spiritual journey.
It is written that Yogananda's teacher, Yukteswar, said the only honor a man can pay his God is to seek him. And of course, we could clean this up and also say the only honor a woman can pay her goddess is to seek her, and all variations thereof. So, Cayelin, does this mean that the fire signs are the only spiritual signs?
Not at all. That each one has their own way of approaching a spiritual path. And actually, for me, as somebody who has a fire moon and a water rising sign, this information was really helpful because my tendency was to go towards things like being involved in transcendental meditation and so on. That wasn't really working for me because I needed to be moving in a different direction. So this can help people to really understand what their, for lack of a better word, enlightenment path is, or what's the way that's going to help them reach that place of fulfillment most quickly.
On that particular subject, we make no pretension as to be able to define what is enlightenment, what is self-realization, any of those kinds of issues. Actually, from our perspective, from the shamanic astrology perspective, those are not definable terms. They're beyond the concepts that the mind can hold. But what shamanic astrology is most helpful at is assisting a person at perceiving what is the most useful or effective path for that individual to reach their life's goals. So, you can, these terms can be used, interchangeably, sometimes in a sloppy way, self-realization, fulfillment, enlightenment, and so on. What we're trying to say here is that each individual will have their own unique pathway toward the fulfillment of their life's journey. And within this framework, we talk about the different dharmas, we talk about the different yogas, and each of them can be related to different places on the wheel of life, as represented by what we know in certain parts of the chart. Certain parts of the horoscope will give the clues regarding that. I'll actually turn it over to you, Mary, because I know you, as the chairperson of the fire committee, brought some inquiries, questions.
Well, I did.
Here today.
And I guess the first one for our viewers out there would be to ask you to explain specifically on the chart where the clues are to one's way to enlightenment, explaining perhaps the script and the role of Jupiter on the natal chart.
Yes. So if we're using shamanic astrology specifically for, say, our path toward realization, enlightenment, fulfillment, self-realization, whatever terms we want to use, we mainly are looking at the Jupiter position in support of the ascendant, the rising sign. And it's like every one of the 12 mystery schools. I mean, in shamanic astrology, we use the expression mystery school for what is usually meant by a sign. But we're looking at the sign of the ascendant, which will reveal a particular way of life. And the Jupiter position also as a way of life. And we're using the word dharma for that. Like a person's, in a sense, their duty, their set of instructions in the current life for what way of life they came into the life to perform, as a means of getting to the fulfillment of their life's journey. So Jupiter by sign, so by sign you have 12 different mystery schools that Jupiter can be part of, that can represent, and then you have 12 different rising signs, and each of those represents a specific pathway to that place of freedom, fulfillment, self-realization, enlightenment, again, whatever words you want to use for that. And it's going to be different for different people. Certainly one of the unique contributions of shamanic astrology is in no way ever to say that, the one way, or everyone needs to be doing it in a particular way. We all need to meditate a certain way, or we all need to be celibate, or we all need to be in a monogamous committed relationships for life, or we all need to have children, or there's so many different possible pathways. And the thing that's so great about this paradigm is it gives very specific instructions, which is not always the path of least resistance. It's like, here, try it this way. Maybe you've been avoiding a particular way of living your life. Well, if the chart suggests a certain rising sign, then you haven't been doing that. Well, then sooner or later you may have to go down that road in order to fulfill the original intent of your life. Cayelin, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you just described that beautifully, and I'm not sure I really have anything to add to that. But I will just say it's very amazing to see how helpful this can be for people, because sometimes they are maybe on a path that it isn't fully speaking to them. And when they get this information, then they can make adjustments to that in a way that can really support them. Right. And it's really wonderful to see then how much their life can light up as a result of that. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to inset into that is really one of the huge contributions that shamanic astrology provided for me. My rising sign in Scorpio was very out of favor, coming from a Catholic background, and I have to say that becoming aware of that and what that meant really changed the way I perceived life, my direction in it. The fact that I had been avoiding something that my culture had told me to stay away from, but was really my path. Mm-hmm. So that was really huge. And becoming involved in shamanic astrology was really a big piece of claiming that, I think.
And this actually, Mary, thank you for that. This reminds me that one of the reasons why we call it shamanic astrology, as opposed to some other name, is because we're putting as much emphasis on the journey of involution as much as evolution. And what I mean by that, I mean, if we look at the history of the Western astrological and even in India astrological tradition, so much emphasis was on going up and out, as if this realm we're in here was the lower realms, the fallen realms, and we need to get off the wheel, or transcend all this. Ascend, yes, a certain version of the concepts around ascension. Well, it's fine to be on a path of evolution, which is to add consciousness, to add spaciousness, to add objectivity, to see the bigger view, to take consciousness as far as possible. That's fine. But we have to also include that the human journey is spirit into matter, and that is what meant by involution. And many of the rising signs, including the one you just mentioned, Scorpio rising, is one of the ones that clearly is about involution. It's kind of like saying, we think it's really great you have a tremendous consciousness, but see what it would be like if you could keep it awake as you go down and in to the physical and the emotional. So we include that, and at least 6 of the mystery schools are about involution,
right,
not about evolution. So I think it's really important and this is how the fire quadrant really contributes here, is for a person to see what path they're actually on. I mean, they might have been an adept at an evolutionary track before, and now in the current life, it's like we're going the other direction. But it could just be the opposite too. I know all kinds of people that are fabulously well grounded from the earth, but they actually need to kind of go up and see a bigger view, to expand to a greater consciousness. So it's different for different people.
Well, speaking of ascending, we've heard you talk about the ascendant or the rising sign here as this kind of focus or this place where the soul is going, and I've seen a lot of astrology paradigms suggest that is the North Node. So how do the nodes come into the Shamanic Astrology paradigm? And also coming in as a adept of one of the archetypes, where do you find that on the chart?
Well, in this particular paradigm, the moon position in combination with the south node of the moon's house placement will suggest what particular dharma or yoga you had been adept at before. And then the ascendant, and as already mentioned about the use of Jupiter, but also the house position of the north node, those factors together will create a really interesting picture, a storyline for the current life journey. For what directional flow are you moving toward? So it's not the sign of the nodes, but the house positions themselves. One from our past. We don't come into the life as a blank slate. We've come from somewhere, and maybe we were fully realized from there. But now we did incarnate again, and now we have to figure out what we're working on now. I use myself as an example. I was very fortunate when I came into the life. Good old Capricorn moon with a full allotment of Saturn. I've always known my calling. I've always known my work. What I haven't known so much about is my relational life, Libra rising. And so most of my more challenging life experiences have been in that particular area, but that's also where my greatest happiness is. So it's to be aware of what Libra rising is actually about was, really helpful on my own journey. And I think that for everyone to know what their spiritual path is, what could be more foundational? What could be more fundamental in our life? And that speaks to our way of life, which we're using the word dharma for, one of the 12 dharmas. But every one of these, whether it's from our past or whether it's the directional flow of our soul now, will have certain yogas that would be used in order to reach that place. So we're in this particular paradigm, we're using yoga not as, physical postures. Or like the definition of yoga, it simply means union. but we're using it within this framework as the variety of different techniques we can use to reach our life goals. There are certain actions we can take. So for example, if a person is on a relationship path, their dharma is one of conscious relationship, well then relationship itself is the yoga. If you are a householder, if you're here to bring a family in a good way, in a way that provides nourishment to the children, well then you're on more of a karma yoga path. Getting married, being a parent is going to be a yoga, okay? If you are here on a purely evolutionary path, go up and out, maybe you're a lot of Aquarius, a lot of Sagittarius, something like that, well then maybe the yoga is going to be learning everything about Vision Quest, or going to the mountain and developing fabulous techniques of higher mind, of witness consciousness, the eye behind the eye, to be able to, in a sense, detach from this world we're in. So it's different for different people.
Hey, Cayelin, Daniel spoke just now about where on the chart, how the moon represents what we came in with, and how that also indicates a little bit about our dharma of the past. And we know that Jupiter represents the dharma of this lifetime. If those two signs are the same on somebody's chart, am I assuming correctly that the path that one would have for their dharma in this lifetime is really what they've already achieved in a strong way in their former incarnations? Or how would you describe that or explain it?
That's a great question, and my understanding is that whatever it is that we've come in with and we've mastered, these archetypes that we see in the astrological paradigm, a shamanic astrology paradigm, are in a big evolutionary journey at this time, as is all of us and all of life ultimately. So it would be an opportunity then to take it from what it is that has been known and has been mastered to a whole new octave, another layer or level of expression. So the challenge would be then for somebody who has that is not to get stuck in the old and only doing that, but also seeking what's the new evolutionary edge of that particular archetypal energy.
Okay.
If I could just add one thing to that, the same issue would apply if a person's moon is in the same mystery school as the rising sign. Okay, so I have a lot of folks that I've worked with that say have a Scorpio moon, Scorpio rising. They're actually here, therefore, to take shamanism, to take tantra, to take this journey of feeling, function, involution into a new place. It's kind of like we need a new version of Scorpio, is basically what that's saying. So they've been a master of certain elements of it in the past, but they're wanting to dream it into a new expression.
What's the evolutionary edge of that archetype?
Mm-hmm.
Is what they're seeking.
Yeah, I'm one of those people with a Gemini moon and a Gemini rising, which is why I call myself Gemini Brett, though I have a Scorpio sun, and I'm finding in my own path that I have to release some of the old Gemini to contribute to the new Gemini that's being born now.
Yes.
The shamanic astrology paradigm recognizes that the archetypes fall into 3 categories. That would include in service to spirit, in service to self, and culture bearing or in service to other community. So how does that play into the Dharma and the fire?
Each of the 12 has its own unique journey or pathway to its own fulfillment, to its own contribution, to its own freedom, enlightenment, self-realization. Some people think because one of our categories is called in service to spirit, that it's only those 4 that are, quote, spiritual. Nothing could be further from the truth. The division of the 12 mystery schools into these three groupings can be actually very simply thought of as 4 of them are about self, 4 of them are about others, and 4 of them don't have anything to do with self or others. It has to do with something other than people. It has to do with a connection directly with what we call spirit. Every one of them has its own unique spiritual path. You know, we talked about karma yoga, bringing a family in. That's certainly in the householder category. The in service to spirit one can include numerous things. It can be the individual who is meditating on a mountain, never even talks to anybody. That could be their spiritual path. There could be individuals that are entirely world servers. They don't have any real personal relationships. They're like entirely transpersonal. That can be one of the in service to spirit ones. And then these ones called self-interest, the ones that in mainstream astrology are called fixed signs. Those are not selfish. They have to do with the requirement, the responsibility of each of those to take that element to its limit. You know, I mean, that is the spiritual path. We could say the spiritual path of Scorpio is to go to the edge of aliveness. I mean, somebody needs to do that. The spiritual path of Aquarius is to expand consciousness as wide as possible. That's what they do. That's what the world needs to have done, we could say, even though the person is doing it for their own experience. You know, the person who has Leo Mystery School, you know, it's to be creator for its own sake, you know, to be closest to that place of pure creatorship. So each one of them has its own unique, quote, spiritual path. And there could be a yoga and a dharma associated with each one of them.
And fix yourself to fix the world in these fixed signs.
And take responsibility that it's your journey. You know, that you've not completely abdicated yourself.
My thought about that is that it's helpful to know that sometimes people are coming from a place where they have developed a spiritual practice or have been in service to something greater, and they have not had a chance to have a personal self. And so then their journey is to really develop that sense of personal self, and that can be just as challenging and difficult as it is from somebody who has a really strong sense of self and going to releasing that and developing a sense of some connection to something greater.
Okay, thank you, both of you. Daniel, in Shamanic Astrology, it's always quoted that, from you, you've often said that astrology is the highest of the lowest of the lower mysteries. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yes. Yes, the highest of the lower mysteries. So first of all, what are the lower mysteries? Well, this includes pretty much everything we would learn, you know, in science. You could even include something like economics, physics, chemistry, even mechanistic psychology, behaviorism, every field of study that human beings have ever engaged in could be thought of as the lower mysteries. And astrology, as the highest of the lower mysteries, is called the highest because it's the one that contains all of them. I mean, to be a good astrologer means that you have been accessing the entire history of the human race. You know, it's the history of psychology. It's everything human beings have ever been up to is included into good astrology, which is why the ancient world recognized it as the highest of the lower mysteries. But what are the higher mysteries? This kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation regarding the purpose of the fire quadrant. The higher mysteries, astrology we can't say astrology is of the higher mysteries. It can only lead the way to them. The higher mysteries include things like grace. No one ever earns grace. It comes from elsewhere. It includes how in the world does self-love actually operate. You know, self-love is more than simply having a good week. It also will include this mystery of how self-realization actually happens, this thing that cannot be defined. Which is why ultimately what the fire quadrant is really about is our homage, our service to, our surrender to great mystery. That's why we call it great mystery. I prefer that expression to God or Goddess, you know, because then different people have different ideas about that. Great mystery kind of is like a concept. It's a thought form we have beyond any concepts. You know, it's like saying we cannot know what great mystery is. It's our privilege to be part of great mystery, to be part of the unfoldment of the one reality. But the different mystery schools can give us the clues about to have that ineffable experience, that luminous, numinous experience with that greater essence, which we call great mystery. So that's on one hand, highest of the lower mysteries. But any astrologer with any humility knows that even the best astrologer on the planet can't really know ultimately what great mystery has in mind. But as astrologers, it is our thrill. It's like an eros to get close, to get as close as possible, to actually get a sense of what is called the plan, you know, the holy plan, or what in the Emerald Tablets is referred to as the pattern, capital P. To actually see into and feel into that pattern. And each of the 12 mystery schools has its own unique way of touching into the pattern, feeling into the pattern, seeing the pattern, depending on what element we're emphasizing. And to get close is a thrill. I mean, not everybody has that experience. An astrologer certainly better have that. But if they think they can really know the whole thing just because they know astrology, no. It's actually the more astrology you do, the more humble you become about all of this. Because we're part of great mystery that's unfolding.
It's beautiful.
You know, I just want to bring in that today is Thursday, Jupiter's Day. So what a wonderful time to talk about the fire, and it's September 10th, so Venus conjuncted the moon and entered the crown gate, another wonderful fire mystery. And we thank you all who are watching out there so much for dancing through this great mystery of shamanic astrology. Thank you, Daniel.
My pleasure being here with you.
Thank you, Cayelin.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Brett.
And thank you, Mary.
Blessings. Thank you.
And September 10th, of course, means that a week ago it was your birthday, also on Jupiter's Day. So happy solar return as we mention the fire. Love and planets, everyone. We will see you in space.
Love and magic.
Bye, everyone.
Oh.